And as we reported earlier, twice in the last 24 hours, President Trump took aim at undocumented immigrants in the USA, tweeting again today that, quote, DACA is dead. And his comment at the Easter egg roll, blaming Democrats for failing to protect the Dreamers, probably won't sit well with a coalition of conservative groups led by mega fundraisers Charles and David Koch. They're urging Trump to compromise on a deal to help people brought to the country as children in exchange for funding his border wall. Catalina Cruz's life is very typical of many DACA recipients. She's a dreamer. She was 9 years old when her mother brought her from Colombia here to the USA, where she thrived. She was an undocumented person for 10 years. Well, now she's an attorney and a candidate for New York State Assembly representing District 39 in Queens. Welcome, attorney Catalina Cruz.
Thank you for having me.
What a journey you have had. The big question, obviously, what was your transition from being someone who was undocumented to the point you got to right now? How did you make that leap?
It's almost an incredible story. I have to pinch myself at times. I spent over a decade with my mother living undocumented, and I was able to regularize my status and become a legal permanent resident and later a citizen through my then husband. And I went to undergrad at CUNY Law School, which is the City of New York's public school. And I then became an attorney and have had the opportunity to work with Governor Cuomo, with the former Speaker of the City Council, Melissa Margarito, and now I am taking the leap and running to represent my community.
It seems remarkable. Someone who, in theory, was living in the shadows, and now you are in the limelight trying to represent not just folks who are undocumented or who are immigrants, but a whole district. And you're bringing up the fact that you used to be undocumented. Why bring that up?
Why not now? I think it's extremely important, especially as we hear President Trump make announcements of ending DACA and then making promises that he's going to negotiate, and it's all in vain. I think that those of us who now have the privilege to have status, because it's a privilege, unfortunately, not a right, but it should be a right, we have the opportunity to speak up for our many brothers and sisters, our family members, many of our parents who are still living in the shadows and who are counting on us to fight for them so that we have a more just United States.
What about people who don't have that experience? Do you think that there'll be a backlash for someone like yourself?
There's already been. I think that there are people who don't understand that my path has been about family reunification, and I've had comments about whether I have the right to be here, whether I have the right to run to represent our community, but that's been my entire life. Everyone has always doubted whether I belonged, whether I should be here, and that's not going to stop. I think we as a community need to continue to fight for our immigrants, regardless of the naysayers.
Do you know other people like yourself who had been undocumented and now are holding these prominent positions in politics?
Well, yes. Out in California, we have Wendy Carrillo, who is the first woman dreamer to get elected into state office. There is a state senator, I think he's out of Nevada, and then I'd be the third one in the nation and the first one in the state of New York when I get elected.
So it goes without saying, I probably have a feeling of which party you're from, but I want to hear it from you.
Democrat.
There is this talk that during the midterm elections, you're going to see this blue wave sweeping across the country. Are you part of that blue wave?
I think so. I think that not only am I part of that blue wave, I'm part of that new era of political blood in our community.
Political blood?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we're coming out of unexpected places. This entire time, I had always been the same Catalina, undocumented, for more than 10 years, but I've been working in places that you wouldn't think an undocumented person could have had access to. I was working out of the executive chamber in the governor's office and doing fantastic work for our community. And I think now we see this new wave of folks who want to do good, who perhaps have been living in, whether it was the political shadows or the actual shadows, that want to come out and represent and be a new voice. And we first saw this wave coming out in the last elections in 2017. 2016, where seats that had never been blue started to turn blue. And in purple states, we started to see actual blue.
If you could take me back to before you were in the limelight, before you were this force that's sitting across from me, back when you were 10 years old and you were coming to the USA, do you remember what that was like? Do you remember when you realized that you were in the country illegally?
I realized, so I'll say I was in the country undocumented. I think that's part of the narrative we have to change, because no human being is illegal. It's more about we unfortunately were forced to leave our home country to look for better opportunities in a country where we couldn't have status because of a number of laws. I always knew that I was out of status. My mom was always very clear about stay out of trouble, don't call attention to yourself, don't get in trouble with the cops. Just stay out of the light. But I think it was when my grandmother passed away that I was in my mid-teens that we realized the actual impact of it. My mom couldn't go bury my grandmother, and I had to watch her cry. And yeah, and it was heartbreaking, because what was I going to do? You know, I didn't understand the actual emotional impact in our lives until that moment.
There is talk that this is a form of panic that's unique to these communities. You had that panic?
Yes. My friends call it Hispanic panic. I think it was, you know, it's the idea that many of us had to live with the fear that if mom was late from work, maybe she was picked up by ICE. If I did something wrong, maybe I could be found out and everybody would know my shame or my secret. Because during the era that I grew up undocumented, it was almost like a shameful secret that the family didn't discuss outside of the house. And now we're in an era where we tell everyone that needs to hear that this is the way we were living and this is the way we want to stop living, because our families deserve better.
When we talk about the politics, it's all a numbers game. Clearly, there are a lot of undocumented people who support you, but they can't vote. How are you trying to get folks who can vote to actually go to the polls for you?
By showing them that I am as American as they are. This is the American dream story. Young girl works hard, becomes an attorney, fights for her community, and understands the issues of the working class, of what it means to try to fix a messed up transportation system in our city, what it means to fight for workers that are exploited around our state, and what it means to try to make sure that everybody's rent is affordable and we can stay in our community. So I bond with my voters by showing them that I am just like one of them.
Just like one of them. And to your critics, if you could speak for a moment to your critics, but also to those folks who are still undocumented, in a phrase, what would you tell them both?
I tell them both that I am going to fight regardless of the critics. I am going to make sure that folks understand that immigrants, undocumented or otherwise, simply just want a better life for their family, and that's what I'd say.
Thank you very much, Catalina Cruz, the next politician in that race. Thank you very much.
Thank you.